I got all the excuses in the world. What are you doing? Okay, so back to this. This is SCP-6806. Sorry about that. Another technical difficulty. 6806. All right, there it is. 6806. If we have time, we'll look at some of the comments. I think it's probably a good idea. Okay, let's get this back on the screen. Screening sharing. Okay. So this is 6806, immediately greeted by a very interesting picture that's very dark, and you can kind of see a figure in here, especially if you are of the master race and you're using a computer, and not a phone. But you can kind of see this very characteristic, and the longer you look, unmistakable smile and figure of SpongeBob SquarePants. So without reading a single word, we already know, once again, another highly pop culture article. Take from that what you will. And if I were these authors, which they say who they are up here, so we don't have to try to be unbiased in who this is and what we think of them, although I don't have any opinions about these two authors. These two authors might want to, be careful in the future, because if you know anything about the politics of the site, it's almost guaranteed that articles that mention any copyright, character or figure, these are going to get pulled off the site one day. So let's take a look at this. I'm so curious as to hear how it is that SpongeBob, shows up in this thing. So let's see. Brian, will you kind of give us a quick synopsis, please?
An anomalous figure who presumably lives in a pineapple under the sea.
Right.
SCPs is SpongeBob SquarePants, complete with the character's laughter and the French narrator coming in for commentary because the actual article got too dull on its own. It even sets the site at the bottom of the ocean. You are safe to ignore this article after the fourth sentence of the containment procedures. One or more episodes of the SpongeBob SquarePants television show are to be screened in the Site 58 break room for the viewing of at least 3 individuals on a weekly basis.
Okay. Yeah, I remember reading this one too. So it's sort of like if the last article took a pop culture reference and did something really impressive with it, really, really great. This one didn't. This one didn't do great. So basically, it takes SpongeBob SquarePants, puts him in kind of these try-hard, creepy moments where he kind of shows up in the film of a site, the footage, and he's kind of there and he's kind of not. And there's like some creepy things going on, like you hear a distant shower running, but it doesn't really quite rise to the level of actually creepy. And it just sort of feels aimless. It sort of feels like this whole article just completely rides on SpongeBob, as a sort of a plug-and-play turnkey inclusion in this article. And so I don't think that I think the dialogue is probably the best part of the article, although I don't think it's good. So, that says something there. They're basically just too antagonistic with one another to maintain any sort of emotional connection or larger sort of humanitarian believability, I guess, is a way to put it. But yeah, so and then at the very, very end, it kind of dicks around for a while. Pardon my French. And then at the very end, it tries to get it tries to just push it down to the floor, pedal to the metal, creepy. But it doesn't actually work, in my opinion. So this is an okay article. We already know who the authors are thanks to the tell at the beginning, the very happy to tell you tell at the very beginning there. Down here in the deep blue sea. It does feature a lot of SpongeBob references, so I suppose if you're into SpongeBob, that might be something that you want to look forward to. Okay, moving right along, we have 6581. Let's take a little peek at that. All right, this is, I think, a pretty short article, right? Let's actually go to it here. Yeah, this one's real nice and short. But still, we'll get Brian to tell us about it.
Underwater bone robot army left over from the familial rite of passage to rule. Simple, straightforward, thought-provoking. Slightly flat in terms of concept but an easy enough and sufficiently mysterious read. Thoughtful anomaly.
Yeah, so I would recommend this one. It's once again pretty short. I think the rating is not really reflective of its quality, although I don't know if it has a lot more room, headspace to go. Just given that that's true, it's a little thin, just conceptually. That's my new favorite phrase. And but it is a short read, so you're not really investing too much. It's not going to be too much of a price if you end up not liking it. But I think it's pretty well written. I think the anomaly is interesting. It's always nice to see an anomaly that actually is interesting and doesn't rely on, let's say, the addenda before it actually gets engaging or interesting. So I would recommend this. It is by Wiser Than You, who I don't really know anything about. So cool. That is 6581. Moving on. SCP 6651. Let's take a peek at that as that page loads. Okay. We got some interesting. This is Site 120, which is a canon that I don't really know anything about. I'm sort of learning as we go a little further into the knowledge base of the SCP. If you haven't joined me nightly, you should. We just got done watching the Yurtcast, episode 1, which was all about GOIs and where they should rank on how often they get action. Of course, this being the Yurtcast, that's really kind of probably expected. But it was actually very entertaining and even a little bit educational. So we'll learn about these things, Site 120 being one of them, as we go together. But immediately we see some nice visuals. I don't know what this is. Obviously, it's an AIC, but I don't know what it's doing there. I don't know why it looks sort of like something from the old computer game Tempest. But anyway, we have the ACS. We have some very strange terms going on here. Highly esoteric stuff here. Interesting mimetic-like images. We see a Fae. We see a lot of footnotes, and it's rather busy on the eyes. And we have a lot of addenda, a lot of dead space here, particularly with these inserts. So let's get Brian. I'll plug it into the AI, and he will synopsize this for us, and then maybe give us a little bit of his professional opinion.
A conceptual anomaly that disappears an agent in proximity to its death. Psychological ruin ensues. The Foundation seems to have forgotten basic things in the process, like what a tree is, perhaps to make the mundane article look smarter by comparison. An immediate attempt to be immersive is ruined by the representation of a Foundation AIC as a pharaoh emoji. The convoluted use of the already overwrought ACS makes this anomaly illegible. Relies on ontological technobabble such as exophysics and extranoospherics, which all desperately want to be the next better physics.
Oh my.
Footnote 3 attempts to justify one of the font colors in universe. Never mind all the CSS and varied divbox designs. SCP is artificially split up into -1 so that it can have the veritable Draga class. The article is brimming with pseudo-intellect, like a Marvel film trying to pull time travel out of quantum mechanics. Try too hard to write above your IQ. Attempts like the following: personnel in the vicinity of the area of occurrence negate having heard the following phrases. The data corrupted Zalgo-text trope is used throughout to negative effect. The email table in the second addendum is gawked way to the side on mobile. The author writes com dialogue in the only way they know how, Discord interfaces, complete with an add site command. Site command quickly checks their tells. AIC as emotional support blanket, tells the agent about its day and agent is very thankful. AIC turns into a therapist, therapy sessions. Friends with AIC. Leaves chat equals a suicide metaphor. Gratuitous crosslinks shout stop and go read other work first, and upvote god damn you. Then come back and pick up here. Pharaoh emoji sandwich, it shows back up.
Right.
Ineffectual use of the active blinking type cursor as an end.
Yeah.
The whole article seems to think it has an intellectual mic drop that no one has ever thought of before. Author treats author post as a journal entry and or an ESRA acceptance speech. In the words of the author there, this exists solely for showcasing my Draugr and Erloschen ACS icons.
Oh wow, that's never a good thing. Yeah, he's right. So this article exists solely for the showcasing of my Draugr and Ursula icons. And of course, if you don't know what those are, people took the ACS. You know, the one thing about ACS was so mimetic is because it not only did it have a cool little intro there, but it offers really a lot of customizability, modularity when it comes to things like these little art boxes here. There's really a J article sitting out there somewhere that no one has done, where you do an ACS like this, but you include every single icon that has ever been done, and that's the entirety of the article. And of course, the point is that it doesn't tell you anything. That's the joke. But yeah, so we have some disruption class with some they're so esoteric. This obviously reminds me of Skyrim, but it's so esoteric it really escapes pronunciation, which does no favors to the class here. It's much better when things are concise and easy to understand. Things like safe, Keter, Euclid, yada, etc. Yeah, I remember reading this, and I agree. I think that basically the esophysics, extra noospherics, nospherics, these are all attempts to sort of be pataphysics without really being pataphysics, and trying your hardest to add some sort of patina of profundity to the article, when in reality, a lot of the time these pataphysically bent articles are simply describing basically the author's own thought process, which is not surprising, but it is a little underwhelming and anticlimactic, when I think better art, and particularly writing, comes from extending the artist's intellect outside of themselves. Very isolationist way of thinking pataphysics, in that it really makes the author sort of a deity, sort of gives the author an automatic sort of apotheosis by default. And I agree. I think the data uncompressibles are sort of, once again, like a different twist on the redacted, usage, but I don't think it actually works any better than it. And so if you see all these as just, the old trite redactions, I don't think they actually do too much for the article here. And then towards the end, we do get into sort of a emotional pillow role for the AIC with regards to this Alexander agent, and they basically become friends, and it doesn't help enough, and Alexander, I guess, basically takes his life. A lot of suicide going on in the suicide themes going on in the SCP articles this week, I think I noticed as well. And then, we do have a Egyptian pharaoh sandwich. It shows up at the beginning. It shows up at the end. I think it's also there just like these icons were, basically justifying themselves ex post facto in a retrocausal fashion. Basically the author attempting desperately to get their art shared in a certain way, I think. And then I also agree that this use, it's hard to see maybe on the screen, but you've got this blinking little cursor, which is a wonderful bit of code. If you don't know how to do that, it's really fantastic. And it can be used to great effect. I think an article on the SCP Wiki recently used that to fantastic effect. I don't think this hits that nearly well enough. I think it misses quite hard. Once again, these sort of dot things, they sort of insinuate a little out-of-universe flirtation, but this is an AIC doing it, and so I just don't understand why it's there. I don't think it works very well. So I think it's appropriately rated at 25. This certainly probably is somebody's bag, somebody's thing. It's a little long just for the investment, in my opinion. All right, that's 6651. Let's move on. Hopefully we're making good time here at about 30 minutes in. We do, once again, have about 35 of these to get through, so it's a little bit of a speed round. The wiki decided to dump a torrential downpour of articles in the last 2 days, as you can see here. So, but I think we're doing pretty well. So we'll kick it back to Series 6 for a second with SCP 5747. We immediately see that it has 10 comments, so that could be a good thing. You never know when it's a celebration and when it's a ratioing by numbers. So let's take a look at this real quick. Okay, I remember this one. We automatically see instantly, because the SCP Wiki has trained us like animals to look at the rating instantly. I wish that was collapsed. Interesting images here. We've got obviously some exploratory stuff going on here. We get kind of a nature vibe just scanning this quickly. It's a little long, and we see some very interesting figures here that we'll get to. But a lot of this length is dialogue, so obviously that's spaced. That gives you a lot of space to play with in a way that just raw block prose wouldn't. So that's a consolation. So let's use our handy dandy, the only way to get through all these SCPs in one show, and get Brian to summarize this for us.
A spatial anomaly in a cave features excessive and dangerous temperatures. It is also a resource of an anomalous mineral, useful in building. Straightforward, perhaps too much. Log is cluttered, with descriptions and images saying the same thing immediately next to one another. Some awkward clinical tone with quickly repeating words, typos, tense verb disagreements. Pacing is obtuned, it then takes a very sharp turn into political and social media commentary, with caricature representation of big tech magnates all colluding in a dark, smoke-filled room. Outsourced characterization. Amazons assimilates the anomalous mineral into their production. Very superficial casting, scatterbrained plot, with glaring issues, like the fact that the drone recording all the footage is supposed to be covered but the loudly announces whenever its battery gets low, happens to not happen when it would be revealing, of course. Fumbles over itself trying to end in a relevant way. There is zero possibility to know what is going on without the author's explanation in the comments. Very unmemorable overall. From the author, thank you to Dr. Cimmerian for assisting me in researching the CC compliance of the bottles of beers on the wall song.
Oh my. Okay. Yeah, you don't need to worry about that. I mean, I guess you do since you're on the wiki. That's a shame. That's the state it's gotten into with its paranoia with legalities. Yeah, so I think that's a pretty fair assessment of this, Brian. Good job. And if we want to get a little more into this, it's basically an anomaly that covers the walls. It's a mineral. And then I don't want to ruin the end for you. The point of this is not to be spoiler-esque. It's supposed to give you a taste. But something happens at the end. But like Brian said, there's really not enough information that's given, and there's certainly not enough build-up in this article to sort of get you to that conclusion, once again, without having the author sort of hold your hand through that. And yes, it does cast, as you can see. Perhaps immediately you think that these are a little out of place, but it does cast, magnates of the social media big tech world. We have Jeff Bezos of Amazon, Mark Zuckerberg, we all know, of Facebook, and Elon Musk. And apparently they're all meeting over this anomaly, so it just seems a little far-fetched. Tries to be a little too big for its britches, and I think 8 is a relatively fair example of what this rating would get in a multiverse setting if you did it over and over again. All right, so that is SCP-5747, and we're going to move on to SCP-6816. I had an old version of the 618 that Calibold tried to post, because 618 opened up because Steph Lynch left. I don't know if Steph Lynch is back, honestly. Their Twitter conveyed some remorse for having left, so I wonder if they're back now. But anyway, so the SCP-618 slot was attempted a few times, I think. One of those was a failed attempt that we won't go into because it's deleted and we have enough on our plate as it is. So instead, we will get to the surviving one. But in the meantime, we'll take a look at this 6816. And this, I remember this as an article that stuck out to me. So let's have a quick little synopsis and analysis from Brian, and then we'll get into it. If Brian... Oh, it's -3. Oh, boy, look at that. Oh, it got deleted? It's not deleted yet, but... oh, my gosh. So sorry to see that. All right, well, Brian is getting a drink of water, so we will talk about it. It's really short. Of course, the author tells us who he is, or they are, right away, which is not good for maintaining a lack of bias. But basically, this is a house with some interesting items in it. We have odd formatting decisions with all the number counts of the items sort of underlined here. So like 2000, 3000, 35, these are all underlined for some reason. And then the biggest issue, I think, with this article, and then looking at the comments, really...
A house with some interesting items in it.
Brian, you're too late, man. Just forget it.
Fuck you.
Okay, well, thanks. Yeah, so if you look at the descriptions too, basically everybody has the same issue with this one, which is that it's not very clear that there's any anomaly here at all. In fact, if you were to ask me, this is in no way anomalous. The article does not explain how anything, and particularly the house, which has the primary designation, how that is anomalous. So apparently this article, if you want to kind of dip into it a little bit, makes a little more sense if you know what milk webkins is, and I'm not saying that right because I'm a Luddite. I'm an old fousey, but anyway, apparently you have to know some pre-existing pop culture or pseudo pop culture reference for this to even make sense at all. And last time I looked at this at the beginning of the week, it was a positive rating. I think it was pretty high, actually, maybe relatively safe, maybe even in the double digits. Let's see what the comments say. And of course, we once again get this repetitive motif through the SCP Wiki. It's really on the tier of bees, and fish is starting to get up to that level as well. But we have a recurring sort of theme of milk being sort of its own joke, its own mean to its own end. And so yeah, this guy says, as someone with no idea what a milk webkins is, I think the article holds up just for me because of the powerfully horror vibes. So certainly there are some things here that are strange, but a lot of the people in here felt like this just didn't pull it off. But go read it. It's very, very short, so that's always a pleasant thing to be working with. And I think articles that are short, especially the bad ones. Moving on, we have SCP 618, and again, this is really the replacement for Steph Lynch's article, and those are big shoes to fill. If you don't know about Steph Lynch, very good, very, very, very good author, and probably an even better artist. That's not an insult. That's just how good their art is. So this is, once again, relatively short. Brian, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you thought?
Perceptual anomaly that causes some to hallucinate when trying to eat green vegetables. Short and sweet, carefully humorous, equally disturbing.
Yeah, I agree. So basically the anomaly is people having an aversion to vegetables. And you may wonder if that's anomalous because it goes into mentioning that a lot of people, really the perceptual part of the anomaly peaks at ages 3 to 5. And if you've ever been around kids, as I am with 2 children, they don't like greens. So you may question whether or not this is anomalous, but it gets a lot weirder. It really turns up the strangeness to a higher dial and gets real satisfyingly icky in some places. And it's really simple. It's really nothing more to it than that, but the author does a fantastic job of making a lot out of a little, and I particularly appreciate the nod to this, which is a Series 1 slot. And so I think partially that may have been why the first few attempts of the 618 replacement didn't pan out too well. I think one of them was a Site 43 article with that CSS in there, so that would have been obviously a victory flag planted for that canon and that hub. But I don't think it really was appropriate. Not to judge things extra content, above and beyond the content of the page, but hey, I don't like Site 43 anyway. So I do appreciate that this article is short. It is something that if you didn't know anything, if you didn't know better, you might think would be just a normal Series 1 article. It really fits very, very well into that. And I can't remember who the author is. Oh, Plague PJP. So great job, Plague PJP. I give Plague PJP quite a hard time for being in the Rounder House clique and really espousing a lot of Neo-Law Foundation philosophies. But Plague PJP, like anyone who I criticize, has all the ability in the world to shut me up when they do a fantastic job. And this is one of those moments. So if you haven't read this one yet, I do highly recommend this one. I think it's got one of the higher ratings of the week. I think it's a little outsized, that rating, for the quality. I think people are just very happy to have a replacement of this slot after the first 2 failed attempts. So But real good article, certainly deserves to remain on the site. Let's move on. We are all the way back into Series 3, and once again, I do assume, probably correct in saying this, that this is also a now auctioned off Steph Lynch slot. So let's take a peek at this. SCP-2689. Okay, so we got obviously the cool little ACS thing. I love it when ACS is one color. It looks way better than if it's a bunch of different colors. The author tells us who he is right here. This is just so distracting from an in-universe and immersive perspective to have this elaborate, ornate Site-19, which, by the way, is hard to see on this logo, that black. Get a little shadow, try to lift that a little bit, I would recommend. This is the, if I can read it correctly, Anomalous Entity Engagement Division, which sounds fancy, but isn't, I don't think, anything different really from just what the Foundation does on a general basis, isn't it? Wink Wonk Boy tells us that this is his work. Thankfully, I don't have any preconceived notions or biases about Wink Boy, so that's not going to affect the article read, but it certainly could. So I recommend not doing that for the sake of being scientifically sound in our assessment of quality on the SCP Wiki. So this is, once again, relatively short. Most of the space is taken up by a interview log, so we've got a lot of space in there, so that's nice. Brian, why don't you tell us just a wee bit about this article and, yeah, what you think?
Anomalous fish kept in a break room aquarium on site. Helps people feel better for a short while. Totemo's comment. Flip side, the site itself just that slightly anomalously depressed.
Okay, so this is a fish that is kept in a aquarium at a Foundation site, and basically it slightly heightens motivation and serenity in those who view the specimen. So obviously, once again, we're sort of flirting with anomalousness. Is that really anomalous? Yes, it goes on to justify it a little more, so take a read. But most of this is an audio log that I think was pretty well written and ends with a nice little note at the end. But I think it's fun, it's well done, and I think the rating is probably a little too low. It's only a week old, so we'll see how that gets, obviously. But this is, as we can see, yeah, all for the sake of yanking a Series 3 slot. So there is a little bit of a sooner sort of rush that people are undertake when it comes to this. Maybe the article isn't quite ready yet. Maybe it could have been a little better, but I do think that this was a good job of this article. I do recommend that very much. And then Brian recommended that we read a comment. Sometimes if we have critters on these articles who do a fantastic job of doing crit, we'll call them out. I do expect to feature users like Ard that does a very good job of crit these days, leaving just very perceptive comments in these. So Brian will tell us to read a few of these. So this one, this is so brilliantly understated that it harmonizes perfectly out of universe. The dialogue is so genuine and believable, despite being ultimately intentionally dull, that it reads with more interest and engagement than most interviews and MFT video logs. This person mistyped MFT. It's supposed to be MTF. I guess they're thinking of NFTs. It's feel good without becoming sappy. Finally, something worthwhile to come out of the whole fish thing. Yeah, that's true. So this, once again, is getting up there with milk. It's getting up there with bees. Basically, fish is kind of the new thing. And I agree. The fish invasion of 22 has not been a pleasant thing, I think, for the wiki and for the products coming out of it. But this was good. This was good. And Brian said something at the end there that I think was a little hard to understand. But he was saying, is it an anomaly that makes people feel a little better, or is the anomaly just that the site that they're at on the whole makes people feel a little worse than average, and this just brings it back to non-anomalous baseline? Who knows? That's a good question, Brian, and don't make us think stupid things like that. Okay, so that was 2689. Let's move right along. 6496. This is SCP 6496. Let's take a little peek here. Oh my, it has such a evocative CSS theme, all red. I do like this. There's a little touch behind these red bars. There's an image that's sort of in strips here, so I think that's pretty cool. And once again, once the ACS adopts a solid color decision, I think it looks fine. I think it looks good. I generally ignore everything to the right from here, right on the ACS, because it doesn't really tell you anything, in my opinion, so I just look at the keter. This confuses more than it clarifies. So, and demands quite the vocabulary to know what the hell this is saying. So no thanks. This is keter, and it is decently long, I think. Look at all this. There's a lot of space here. Some collapsibles. We have redactions. And then, of course, the ACS decides to get its usual self, and we can't help but be reminded of Christmas and something like this right here. But all right, and then it looks like we have a couple of offsets to get to. So this is interestingly constructed. It's at a +6, so I guess that is something to say. But it's quite a long article. So let's get Brian once again. Let's utilize our AI. That is why they are there. So Brian, will you please synopsize this for us and then tell us what you would like to? And we will kind of follow along. Look at this. There's a footnote missing. That's interesting. Asgard. So it's kind of like Thor, I guess. I don't know. There's a lot of Asgards going on here. This is bothering me.
The collapse of human cognition. Arguably anomalous, human cognition will collapse eventually by non-anomalous means, i.e. species death or universe death. So, the containment procedures ask the Foundation to devote all resources to it, but this is no different than prioritizing survival, and so is really not a call to any additional action when you think about it.
Okay, let me pause you right there. So basically what you've said so far, if I understand you correctly, Brian, is that this is an anomaly that is about the inevitable collapse of human cognition, which of course is not really anomalous, and given that the universe will die one day, that really goes without saying, doesn't it? And so I think Brian was saying, if I understand you correctly, that that's not really anomalous at all. And if that is the anomaly, it's strange that we get a note to devote all possible resources towards the anomaly, when of course that also goes without saying, because to avoid the inevitable collapse of human cognition is to survive. So we're already doing that. We're already maximizing the resources that we have to ensure our survival. So this already seems like slightly a confused article. Doesn't really have a very clear indication or understanding of its own anomaly. So Brian, thanks for letting me interrupt you. Why don't you continue? A lot going on here. A lot of strike-throughs. It doesn't understand what it is. See, very confused article. It tries again, and it still strikes through, and it doesn't get that far.
Grammar mistakes in the comprox.
Really?
Monthly D-class death is replaced by monthly personnel death, ritualistically. This article toots the in-progress draft format screw-garishly. As such, there are numerous different descriptions, leaving no clear anomaly. This is like reading advice from the Crete forums that was plopped right into the article. OASIS-T only by DM logs treated the same way. Takes the Mary Sue, mixes it with Cinderella story and the trope of a lauded, self-overworked, but ultimately self-dissatisfied genius, the self-immolation amuse for their great production, who needs others to tell them to slow down or they'll die, and applies it to a thinly veiled self-insert researcher who writes so talented of comprox in universe that they get invited by the site director for pointers over coffee and cake, but who is so troubled that they commit suicide. This is a barely non-pataphysical way to pit the IRL author's fantasies of recognition and fears of inadequacy in an article that should be about something else. The article stalls actually being about an anomaly at all until, in one of the two endings when it rewards the reader's endurance with theoretically, SCP-6494 was an anomalous unclassed object with currently unknown properties.
I see.
In this arm of the Choose Your Own Fate, the self-insert has a collegiate tier nervous breakdown due to internal feelings of inadequacy, others' opinions of genuine mean nothing, and kills self. Is posthumously nominated the Foundation star for killing herself. No one is sure there even was an anomaly here. The other arm tries hard to actualize the anomaly as a mental one that is suspected for various types of mental health problems relating to self-esteem. In reality, this is an out-of-universe attempt to force-feed someone's crippling self-absorption into greater public appreciation. The author acknowledges that they are only trying to make their depression and self-doubt an anomaly at least, and the attempt awkwardly flails across the finish line. A second character of self-insertion literally writes a despondent note about depression and inadequacy in the Foundation. This note mentions a breakthrough, but then I did it. And I realized I can make a difference. The word it leads to another of the author's successful SCPs, I'm guessing their first. It is so eager to be a sympathy selfie for the author that there isn't proper treatment given to the anomaly. The meandering conprox, descriptions, and the edgy formatting decisions, for example footnote missing, and redacted interview log participants even though it tells us who is talking, make this feel less like a complete article and instead a few pages out of someone's pocket journal. I am concerned for the author. I mean this in the nicest way. Consider taking a break from this or finding an alternative writing community to get your esteem about you. This wiki is not the benchmark of writing capability.
Yeah, I think that's wow. That's kind of what someone was saying in the comments too. Yeah, this I remember reading this. This was kind of it was very disjarring, which I thought was appropriate because obviously this is about the mental strains of basically an author. So in universe here, there's a researcher who's trying to write an anomaly, and they have this sort of like false start, crippling, lack of confidence that doesn't really get them even to the first step. You have to take that first step, right? And so this author is not doing that in universe and having a very hard time, and it really does sort of dovetail very, very strongly with sort of the mentality that I think a lot of people in the SCP Wiki probably have, which is one of intimidation and just being very unsure of themselves. So I thought I saw in the comments that that was basically something that was brought up, and so yeah. So the author says, "I appreciate it. It means a ton. I'm okay now. I'm past my past." Yeah, so that's good. So I mean, ultimately, I think this is a good thing for the author because it was cathartic. It was cathartic basically. If this helps them deal with this, what is clearly a strong enough mental pit to yell from the base of up out through the well of isolation here, and once again, very appropriately that this is all dark background and very stark sort of darkness going on here. So, all right, well that was interesting, and I don't think I'm glad that it's survived, because I would worry also about this author if it were deleted. That's no reason to keep an article on the wiki, but that's what it is. I think 6 is a pretty fair rating for this. I think the job of the author is not to turn the medium into an autobiography. It's to find a way to filter that autobiography through the medium, almost to the point that someone reading it might not even know. That's really the more technically challenging, and I think the real success for something like this. Okay, moving on, because we're doing pretty good. We're doing pretty good time here. I hope all weeks aren't like this. Last week, I think it was a little slower. There was an average of 2 articles every night last week, and then it exploded on the weekend, so maybe that's a thing that we'll have to get used to. All right, the next article is SCP-6432, and this one has the most comments that we've had so far, just going into it, 14. So let's take a look at this and see what's going on. Okay. Right. Brian, do us some help here, because I see a long scroll bar on the right here. So Brian, why don't you do what I hired you for and check it out. And then while you are
an anomalous predatory bird with 6 wings and no legs, hops on talons, that causes multisensory hallucinations in those that look at it, and that cause portals to exist wherever it attacks and feeds on prey, includes humans. Author kicks us off with a poem-like floating passage of dialogue, which makes zero sense in universe, of course. This poetry stylization continues throughout the article with choice words separated with several line breaks from their paragraphs and given unique alignment. This gives the vibe of try-hard edginess for its own sake. The selection of these choice words seems as footloose as amateur poetry as well. There's an exploration log that is about a spatially anomalous house, is where the SCP was discovered. The video log's dialogue is, save for the fucks and dick jokes, worthy of Cartoon Network. I can't believe these lines were typed out by the author, who looked at them and went, yeah, that'll work. Decent action and pacing in this though. Stylized text falling through the in-universe document spells it's not fair. The commission debrief is in a collapsible that reads, was it me? Throw debrief redacts what happened to an agent's eye, when we know what happened because the article has said worse already. Good characterization and believability in the next dialogue, you feel for the agent. The poetry stylization finally catches up to the good dialogue and ruins it. The interaction becomes an anti-ableist, it's okay to be fucked up, pity party selfie. The message is one of emotional consolation and resiliency in the face of overwhelming tasks. The text gimmick is the worst part of the article and rudely interrupts what would otherwise be a quality read. In the author's words, it's intended to be a reflection of the protagonist's feelings. I tried to make sentences feel stunted or jarring, or in other cases to make it look like they're literally falling. This is anomaly as an excuse for other genres of fiction to thrive turned up to 11. The bird anomaly has zero relevance to the article. Dolphin says it best, I just come down on the other end of it as they do.
Okay, interesting. So, yeah, I think that's all pretty evident as you scroll through this article. So there's a lot of textual stylization, and that's really tricky to do. I mean, I think in order to do that, you necessarily have to disrespect the idea that you're supposed to be doing this from at least somewhat of an in-universe perspective. You know, when you don't do that, it's hard to not like these things, though, because I think it's really, obviously it's inventive. And I'm sure this is a little harder than it looks, you know, especially when you juggle like desktop and mobile. You know, that can be real difficult to make sure that looks good. And then we've had other authors do this in the past, obviously as a format screw. I think what's missing here is any sort of justification in universe. Typically when you have a format screw, and we'll get to a few of them for this week's articles that do a very, very good job of this. But when you have an in-universe format screw like this, so you basically have to understand that this is what someone is supposed to be seeing when they open up a document in the database. You know, it needs to justify itself. Otherwise, the author who tells us their name right here, is basically just shitting on the genre, shitting on the format, and they're doing something else, which is that they're really making it a lot easier. They're sort of fattening their own capabilities as a writer into a less healthy, less muscular state, less capable and athletic, because it's much, much harder to find a way to maneuver. It's a difficult thing. You have to really fire up a lot of neurons to ask, how can I get this jarring feeling into the text? And if you have to rely on what are essentially text-based spacing gimmicks to convey your intention of the emotion here, which is one of failing and falling and being disjointed and once again inadequacy, that's really the job of the writer. That's really what the tools and the colors and the canvas and the paint of the author are, the words on the page. This is fine for poetry, but I'm not so sure it is at home as an SCP and in an SCP. And so I think that the author really takes a little too many liberties stylistically for this to be respectable containment fiction. And then Brian said something in the comments. Once again, we do like to read really good critique that's left in the comments. Dolphin Slug Chugger says, I love this shit. I want to see more of it on site. It has a few issues, flashy but disjointed. The anomaly feels more like a vehicle to deliver the emotional thrust than a truly connected part. The exploration log moves plot, but barely develops character, and the final log relies on character that's being developed on the spot and needs to stick the emotional landing but can stumble. So I think that's fair. And once again, this is it's talented writing. There's no question about it. But this is another example of basically use the description, and certainly by this point, the containment procedures. The containment procedures, this really happened with, a few years ago. It's long since sort of been forlorn and neglected. But the description is sort of going that way too. To where basically it's a doormat for most modern authors in the SCP. You basically just get the description out of the way with, you get it over with, and it rarely has, in cases like this, that has this philosophy of the anomaly in service of the ensuing narrative and the addenda. It rarely actually does anything at all but act as that doormat. So basically you have a bunch of authors who are trying to get it out of the way with as quick as possible. Really, this reads like a description from Series 1, so I like that, but I think that's more of a slap in the face because obviously it's almost like it doesn't matter what it is, because we know that the modern tastes don't take kindly to these sorts of old school descriptions, although I do appreciate it. And once again, just stylistically looking at it, it seems as though the description solely exists to reinforce this stylization of the text. So I think that this is just egregious. Absolutely, it doesn't make any sense being here. This is really somebody took a wrong turn somewhere. So this article is rated 62, and I think that is entirely too high for this article. But hey, that's why I'm not on the SCP Wiki. All right, so we are moving on now, making decent time. This is going to be another Series 3 article. Is that right? Yeah. Here we go. So let's open that up. This is SCP-2354, and I guess I'm assuming, by the way, that all of these are Steph Lynch slots. All right, so this is really short. This is really, really short. Brian, what do you think about this?
Anomalous entity that stalks and bludgeons people who have recently lost a loved one. Sort of like suicidal grief anomalized, except it cuts off your hand or genitals after. Very polished clinical tone. Classic, achieves a lot with a little, with a twist at the end. In the words of comments, you nailed the cold, conservatively inferential tone. Damn. It's been a while since I've read something with this much of a spooky atmosphere.
Way to go. Okay. I love hearing good comments from people in the comment section. They do a good job. Yeah. So this article is dramatically short, but kind of like that 618 we just looked at, but it does a very, very good job. It basically sets up the anomaly really, really well. It sort of nudges you just a little bit, and then really kind of makes that nudge just a little harder delivered in the incident log here. So it really, once again, like this comment says, it's a conservatively inferential tone. I think that's a great phrase for this. So good job. And this is written by Stoner99, and it's called Nemesis, which I think is just an excellent name as well. So good job to Stoner99, who I've seen before. I think I know that person in some ways. 2354. So this is the next one, SCP-6243. Let's take a look at that. Okay, another very, very lowly rated article. That doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Let's get Brian to surmise this for us, because we did the reading.
Anomalous humanoids. One's an old lady, one's a young lady covered in ash who vomits upon opening its mouth, A, and another lady covered in gold dust who produces a gold coin upon opening her mouth, B. Neither the vomit or the gold coin come into play again. The old lady is in a pocket dimension accessible by a well, which both A and B spontaneously fall into independently. When inside, you see a tall tower, a talking apple tree that wants you to harvest its apples, and a talking oven that asks you to take burning bread out of it. The humanoids are in the Great Hour, and one person describes the old lady as having super large teeth that only show when her mouth is open, as if teeth normally show when mouths are closed.
Oof.
Kinda Mother Goose Grimm-like vibe. Ultimately too much going on with no real reasoning evident. The reason becomes apparent in the author post. This is based on a childhood fairy tale. Doesn't work well as an SCP.
Okay, yeah, I remember this. I almost didn't read this because I thought it was gonna dip into deletion, and it was pretty clear early on that this wasn't a miss by the voting class of the SCP Wiki. Yeah, as Brian said, it's a set of 3 humanoids, although the primary one is this old lady, and yeah, it really does have a very, very good sort of old, like, the sort of folk tale that Disney would take and make a bunch of money off of or something like that. But it really meanders. It really doesn't understand. It doesn't have any continuity or callback. Things are sort of brought up and then left by the side of the road to never be mentioned again. And even after almost a week, it looks like we still have XXXs in the actual notes. So I think this is a very appropriately rated article. I also think that it's not good enough. I think that this article should be deleted, and that it is on the wiki is a blemish to the proposed standards that it still maintains to this day. But maybe that'll be corrected very soon. You just never know. Sometimes it takes some time, and it can go in the other way. Sometimes articles do very poorly out of the gate, and they actually end up doing well if they can hang on. The next one, 6165, and we are on the 17th of April now, which is good news. Let's take a look at this one. We have already a breadcrumb trail of links here, so we're in a canon of some kind. We see the author, so thankfully I don't know anything about this author, so instead of coloring the article prematurely with biases that are human and that we can't avoid if someone's going to do something like this, at least I don't have any preconceived notions for this author, so that's nice. The information calls this Ramadan, so it has something to do with that, I'm sure. There's a content warning, so let's do this for our viewers if they feel like they need it. This content warning is about suicide, menstruation, insects, gore, and child abuse. Okay, that's an interesting combination that I think is quite unsettling. Let's get our resident AI who combed and crawled this article to synopsize it for us and give us a few notes of analysis.
Anomalous series of events. These are compiled in the form of interviews, and the article notes they can't be sure these are accurate. Odd things going on with residents of a British Pakistani community. Some fucked up shit going on here, excellent creepy factors by the author. It skirts the demand for narrative and is so good at being unsettling, it doesn't matter to the voting class that it isn't there, save some disapproving comments about a lack of larger connotations or connectivity. One commenter laments this as just horror in a jar, when I think that is a wonderful way to describe the enjoyability and strengths of this article. This is part of a larger canon called the Trashfire canon. Rarely does a title capture the essence of something so vividly and insulting. The Trashfire canon seems to be a glorified headcanon for how the Foundation should operate in universe. As opposed to a situation-based canon, like nearly every other canon, Trashfire seems to be based on a set of literary thematics so vague. It could literally apply to anything: order versus chaos, social creatures, failure. Thank goodness this article does not stray too close to the canon to be damaged by it, but then again, with so ambiguous of criteria, how close can you really get?
Wow, Brian. Well, that was more of a critique and comment on the actual hub that it's a part of and not the actual article.
Get fucked, sir.
Okay, well, that's not very nice. So, yeah, I do remember reading this one, of course. I read every single article this week, which was... This is fucked up. Anyways, so yeah, this it had something to do with the Weevil and menstruation, and like the content warning tags said. And I thought this just did a very, very good job of not trying too hard, not trying to overexert itself. Really sort of, if it was a dance, it would sort of be self-contained. You could film it, in the space of a webcam. It's really not spatially ambitious, I think, but it really does a good job of really injecting some very, very disturbing imagery in here. You can read a little bit of it there, perhaps. But yeah, so this was a shorter article. Once again, I don't know if this is something that's recent, but I do love the shorter article trend. It's just, especially when you have 35, 40 articles coming out a week, unless you're doing a show like this and it's somewhat organized and somewhat streamlined in a mechanistic fashion, it's really, really difficult to read all the SCPs in a given day, even. So I do appreciate shorter articles. I think that's a return to style in many ways. But this is a fine article. I think that at 21, it's probably a little lower than I would gauge it, just based on things like the polish of the clinical tone, and it really does a good job of a constellation sort of approach to the anomaly, where you have you have a sapling, you have the bug, you have something going on with menstruation and menstrual blood, and it doesn't really explain or tie a lot of those together, but it really does a great job juggling those things without actually bringing them together, and leaving plenty of room for the reader to sort of infer their own slants of horror as they bring it to the table, which is not easy to do. And then just to cut Brian some slack a little bit here, I'm not really familiar with the trash fire canon, but yeah, it looks like it does have not a ton of articles. That's fine, but it's a strange one that I guess I'll maybe look back at one day when we have more time. But that's SCP-6165. So that was certainly an interesting article, and I do recommend a read of that one. The next one is 6395, moving right along. And let's see what this one looks like. Okay. Yeah, I remember this one. Brian, why don't you do the honors of telling us what this is about, and I'll piggyback on what you got to say. Nice picture. Nice picture there. Beautiful. And the ACS, mixed matched of colors, rating 10. I think that's probably too high, honestly.
A hive mind anomaly inhabiting all people in a fictional Turkish town named Alankakarın, which roughly translates to colorful twilight. When you Google this, it brings up IMDb for the Twilight movie saga and clips from the Turkish version. The anomaly makes it seem like there are distinct people and personalities in the town, going so far as to enact arguments and deceit, while really it's all just the anomaly underneath controlling this. Footnote 3 gets kinda woke but not bad. The discovery log gets even more woke, unfortunately, being sure to include a strong Wayman I am the man in charge. There are grammatical errors, like periods where question marks should be, and absences of punctuation altogether. Really bad characterization, after a grand total of 9 short lines of dialogue from Boss Lady, where the character just tells the interviewee that there is something fishy going on. The closing statement mentions her proven negotiability with SCP-6395 Alpha. There was no negotiating in the log. The first tab accomplishes absolutely nothing. The second tab is an interview with just SCP-6395, which given the article's description doesn't make sense, but later it's clear the author meant the Alpha instance again. How the Foundation comes to prove, both to the interviewee and themselves, that this whole town is an anomaly is markedly thin and ridiculous. I quote Boss Lady, "Well, I'm sorry to inform you 6395 Alpha, but your acting skills are not stellar. Despite having done an impressive job crafting so many unique characters, you left many similar character traits in each of them. They were minimal things that were done subconsciously. It's tough to detect, but we were able to figure it out with how many people you are demonstrating." The interviewee reacts like he's just been unmasked by Fred and Scooby-Doo. This interview features pointless and uninspired stage directions for the characters. For example, Dr. Oolon spreads out her arms wide and rotates slightly as if to refer to the surrounding environment. Wonky clinical tone, like the two instances are going to be designated SCP-6395 Beta 1 and -2. Suddenly, SCP-6395 Beta 1 is the mayor, when the previous tab had SCP-6395A was. I guess, the real mayor is the friends we made along the way. SCP-6395 Beta 2 doesn't have any lines or role in this interview, in which Boss Lady is given an apple. That's it. The addenda are a grab bag of aimless inclusions that have no bearing or relevance to anything established prior or after. A note from a new boss writes, I see countless facts about SCP-6395 that have very little research sunk into it. Rarely does an article archive such unintentional but fitting self-critique. New boss wants to do testing logs, the first of which is an assault on a pre-established house consisting of a family of 3 SCP-6395 Beta instances, a father, daughter, and newborn infant. This article is way too poor to mention everything wrong with it. It goes on and on and on like this. This is perhaps...
Yeah, I'm going to stop you there. That's well said. I think this is probably, it's just really, it doesn't have any cohesion to it whatsoever. The characters are just flung around wildly. They show up and they don't even do anything. It's the equivalent of somebody coming onto a stage in a play, even going into the limelight, the spotlight for a second, and then like just not having any lines and walking right back out. It's just really, really strange. I think this is probably, of all the articles I read this week, probably the least well-collected, the least tonally polished, probably one of the most egregious articles I've read this week. And that it passed the test out of the gate, even to the level of +10, I think is an absolute statement, unfortunately, on the failure of the standards of the SCP Wiki, on this one at least. A real miss. I'm not even sure that this article would survive in the RPC authority, to be quite honest with you. I think 10 is just entirely too gracious. I'm not sure what this is doing on the site, much less at 10. But if you want to read this, I mean, this is basically like the room of SCP Wikis this week. SCP Articles this week. It's so bad that it might actually be entertaining. Okay, so moving on, we are going to get to SCP-6697. This one's got a bunch of comments, so let's take a peek at what we're doing. Okay. Good rating. Oh, this one. Oh, God. Okay. This one is probably going to be the recommendation of the week. Tell us a little bit about it.
An anomalous set of bootleg videocassette tapes of a show, in this only collected instance, Seinfeld, which enters a non-existent, procedurally generated, ever-changing and infinite Season 10. The poor English, spelling and grammar of the bootleg company is a bit overbaked, almost too ridiculous, but elicited a laugh here and there. It is also counterbalanced by very dry, skillful clinical tone. The article utilizes pataphysics effectively, which is saying a lot. Skillfully controlled pataphysics is not a compliment commonly possible when it comes to SCP articles that try it. It's also a pitch-perfect impression of Seinfeld. The slow burn, show don't tell horror with George is subtle and masterful. Yeah, this was clearly, easily one of the contenders for best of the week, in my opinion. Rating be damned. Actually is pretty high for this week, but there's one that's higher. It's not even like the one that we just saw with all the stylized text is about this rating, which is just criminal. This article is fantastic in every way. It was written by Dave U. Fool, so that is a little hint as to the quality of it. It's just impeccable. This doesn't miss. It's ineffable. It's a fantastic article. This is a great example of using prepackaged characters, basically the Seinfeld staff,
and not just letting that be their character, basically just the introduction into it. This takes those and really is an exponent to those characters, does them services, and also presents them in ways that obviously are not possible in the show, and yet it's totally believable. There's a lot of articles that don't do that well, whether it's from IRL characters from pre-existing shows like the SpongeBob one we saw already in this episode. But this one does a fantastic job of it, and it's quite easy to see if you read it. So this is certainly one of the ones I recommend, 6697 by Dave Ufool. Next one is 6915. Let's take a peek here. Okay. I don't remember this one off the top of my head. That's why we have Brian. Brian, go ahead.
A description-based anomaly, which is usually the red carpet for a Botox-D mess of a format screw. This one is well justified and effective because it is played very simple. A fella who has a resident brain-eating maggot that uses descriptions of the fella to reproduce. It immediately shows up in other people's brains and feeds. Just a bit of squelch body hotel, some in his shoes sensory sympathizing, and bam, excellent, simple, focused, memorable, and powerful.
Okay, that's supposed to be squelchy body horror, not squelch body hotel. So Brian, I think I don't know, man. Maybe we should change it up and give Brian a rest. It sounds like he's having a stroke mid show. What do you think, Brian?
Fuck you, sir.
Oh yeah? Is that right? So maybe I'll just tell you what, I'm gonna bring let's bring Amy on. Okay. Hey Amy.
Hello.
All right. So yeah, this is really the first in a series of format screws this week. Seemed like to be sort of the middle to the latter part of the week was format screw time. So this one was really, really well done. It's the whole thing is in a character voice. Sort of seems like a southern character voice. I think they nailed that pretty well. And it does a really good job, once again, of justifying its format screw. So in contrast to the one we saw by Radiger earlier, which was the falling text thing, this one 100% and completely justifies why it can't be anything but this. And that's what you want to do if you have a format screw. Otherwise, you're being lazy. You're a lazy writer. So this one is just really, really well done. It's seamless. The in-universe and out-of-universe complications that can arise from format screws and things like this. This was written, this article contains gore, body horror, insects, and death. If you notice anything tag-worthy that's not here, please mention it in a comment. Now, this is a really, really good article. I do want to make sure we get the author in here for that reason. It looks like it's Sound Chaser, which is a great name. So great job on so many fronts. Good job, Sound Chaser. Okay. The next one is going to be 6914 with 12 comments, so that is interesting. I think I remember this one. So, yeah, this one is this is another format screw. Once again, one right after the other. This one has to deal with an anomalous human who is contained somehow by changing the document to resemble baseball statistics. And unfortunately, unlike the previous one, this one didn't really justify its own format screw. There's some good moments in here. I think 30 is a fair rating for this, but just given that it doesn't justify its own format screw, it comes off as just the author being a little bit gratuitous and asking a little too much from the audience, who expect some sort of attempt, some sort of effort. It's just very lazily laying in the bed and asking the reader to do all the heavy lifting intellectually and mentally with things like in-universe justification, things like that. All right, so the next one is 6312, and while that one loads, let's get Amy. Amy, just thank you so much for joining us. Let's hear what you have to say about this anomaly. You did read this. You did read this anomaly, didn't you?
I did.
Okay, good. So let's talk about it.
a pacemaker that attaches to the brainstem that keeps people alive anomalously long. An entire paragraph of the Comprox is in bold font. There is tense disagreement throughout the description, referring to the anomaly in both the present and past, one sentence after the other. The addenda are a series of appeals by the lead researcher to leadership over expanded testing, most rejected. There is a gender determination in the middle of one. It is not a she anymore. The anomaly withers away, and while this contains some good visceral horror in images, so does the article. The anomaly can respond to message commands, leading to a terse dialogue that ends with a 5-line repeat coda from the anomaly in messages.
Yeah, which is never... it's not a hard and fast rule, but when you have an end like this, it's not usually a good thing. It can be done well. So, yeah, I remember this one. I thought this was really interesting because it sort of takes a pacemaker and puts it into the brain, which is really interesting from a medical perspective because, death used to be defined by the cessation of the heart. And then as we became more medically advanced in the last few decades, that definition officially changed to where it's brain death because technically you can keep a person alive while their heart is no longer functioning on its own terms. You have machines kind of like the pacemaker, but they're sort of like pacemakers on steroids. This is something called ECMO, extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, that takes people's bloods for them and pumps it for them. Basically, their heart doesn't even need to be there. It basically is only acting as just a nice little bag that this machine can draw blood from and put blood into, but to get to the lungs and stuff like that. But so anyway, death being defined by the brain's death, this is an interesting little play from a medical perspective. I do see a few things already, like there's missing punctuation at the end of this paragraph of the description. It is a little odd, as Amy stated, that this whole paragraph is in bold. That's a little odd as well. But yeah, so this does something that I love to see, which is the atrophy and cachexia of a wasting away anomaly that's humanoid, and you really just end with sort of the most stripped away and horrifically basic elements of what a person needs to survive. So something pushing the blood and the nervous system. That's basically what all is remaining of this anomaly by the end. And it's a little bit of an ethical situation here presented in the article, but I do think it's a good one. I think 20 is fair. Certainly more of a niche thing, but it does have serious objective problems, like I mentioned, and like Amy said. Okay, so the next one is 6430, SCP 643 and a 0. So let's check it out. Let's see if we recall this one. Yeah, this is fucked the hell up, dude. There is no way this one should be 55. I don't even care if it's how old, a few days. Yeah, this one is totally fucked up. It's totally good. Amy, I know you read this one too, so let's hear it.
A description born, info-hazardous, self-aware metaphysical construct thought to intersect to some degree with the noosphere. It causes PPA to blather on uncontrollably and involves the Fibonacci sequence. Incredibly gripping comprox. Good, understated body horror. There are odd formatting, grammatical, and syntactical decision throughout, but somehow, they work. Some passages are giant run-on sentences and are a little hard to read, but all of this works into a beautiful meta-format screw. A gem of an article. The specific format of the paragraphs is the key to unlocking the article's delicious cleverness. A profound article.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, isn't that funny? We always tend to agree, Amy, and really to an extent, Brian as well, when he's not having a stroke on the air. So isn't that odd that we all agree on things, Amy?
Odd, it is, sir.
Thank you. So this is just a really, really fucked up article. This might be the recommendation of the week. I'll have to think about that. It's very out there. But the structure of it is so cool. And I'll give you a hint, without ruining this, is that the description, each paragraph is just a little longer than the one before it. And I bet you, if you counted the words, don't do that yourself, plug that in somewhere, there would be something that matches that very strictly. So let's just say that. This is an excellent article. It is by SD Lock, of course. What a great icon, by the way. That's a brand-worthy icon right there, if I do say so myself. But yeah, excellent article, so cool. And then really, I think this is the third in a row. Is that right? No, the pacemaker interrupted us, but basically this is the third format screw of 4 articles. So pretty concentrated format screws. So this is next one is SCP-6176, and we are on the last leg of this week. What do we have to say about this? Yeah. This is another metaphysical entity manifesting in a site, just like the last article, actually. Yeah, I think this doesn't make sense by the second sentence. Let's read that. SCP-6176 is a metaphysical embodiment of its metaphysical self, which has produced an intense feedback loop in which it continuously reiterates itself. I have no idea what that means, and I think it's trying to be interesting. It's trying to sort of say something, once again, sort of pataphysical. Anytime you have noosphere and stuff like this, they're always flirting with that. But it's a typical meta, typical pataphysical, typical noospheric mishandling. And I think what this comes down to is the author essentially describing what is a remarkably mundane process as if it were special and anomalous when it really isn't. If you know anything about philosophy, this is basically Berkeley's subjective idealism in anomaly form. Said otherly, that's basically it stops existing once it's not looked at. It's just a little too mystic. Even the testing logs to me, which feature states like waking, sleeping, these are different conscious states they're doing testing in. It gets a little haywire here with consciousness states such as transcendental consciousness, cosmic consciousness, God consciousness, and then unity consciousness. So the test logs really kind of read like the galaxy brain meme progression. It's almost like the old hippie on the subway who's telling you about his most recent acid trip. And yeah, I think the whole thing is this way. I wouldn't recommend this article, but it's not too long, so if you want to dip into it, then please. But it's just a highly, just ridiculously conceptual article that really, it's the difference between distance and displacement. It does a lot of flailing. It moves its legs a lot. But as far as the displacement is concerned, it's net zero. It doesn't really get anywhere, in my opinion. So, and then once again, the image just I have no clue what the image has to do with anything that's been mentioned here in this article. So, yeah, not a recommendation. I think that rating is probably a little too gracious, but it is what it is. Next one is SCP-6037. Let's see if I recall this one. Oh man, this one is pretty good. Amy, why don't you tell us about this one?
A ritual broadcasted covertly during professional kayfabe wrestling matches. This is an elaborate but well-done anomaly that sees the Foundation funding Vince McMahon and a great in-tune parody of professional televised wrestling's marketing gimmicks. It is also expertly creepy in all the right places. The writing is refreshing and inspiring. Lines like "the hated one, he's going. It's coming up to burn through. Like fire through a world of paper. And he is completing. He feels the steel rods of their cries move his flesh. And it's the signature. He is going to swallow the sun. All contort the familiarity of cage match commentary into an ominous and otherworldly logic that is just so jarring. There's masterful use of composition, redactions, and some tasty words here too, favorites being unspool and uproariously. There is a philosophical presence by the last addendum that acts as talented if incidental apologism for the guilty pleasure of fake wrestling and its familiar, ritualistic, strangely comforting narratives. By the end of the article, this applies to all performance art, and becomes profound.
Yeah, so well said. This is just a great article. I think it's a few days old. 31 is a good rating for this. I think it should go way higher. And it's by GAFC. So that's somebody who knows what the fuck they're doing, and this article shows it. It's just a really nice, this has a Series 7 designation, but it could fit in 2, it could fit in 3. I mean, it's just a timeless sort of article. It's just really, really good. So check that one out. All right, so SCP-6553. Let's try to blast through these last ones. It's almost been 2 hours. We're almost at this. Taking a lot longer than I thought it would, honestly. This one is by Tasafra and her dad, so that's a little weird. 6553. This is an anomaly that is basically an anomalous rainbow that shows up even in the absence of any, rain or water. And the bands of color are actually distinct. You can separate them, and they have the consistency of honey. When you drink these individually, they each different color have different effects on the subject who is drinking. Typically, they'll shout a phrase, and something will happen that has something to do with that phrase. And it kind of plays with the leprechaun lore, because this line tells us that if all of the colors are mixed together, they will harden into the element gold. So that's just a little leprechaun wink. Doesn't really have any play, I think, in the actual article. So it kind of casts the leprechaun in there as like this unlocated demonic force that's tentatively given the -1 sub-designation, and it's presumed responsible for what we're seeing here. But anyway, so the demon behind these different colors and what they do seems to have somewhat of a sense of humor with such phrases as the indigo here. The indigo is a nothing color, and there's no reason for it. The subject will vanish from baseline reality. So, haha, that's pretty funny. Anyone can be a star is the yellow phrase, and it says through an unknown anomalous means, any subject who ingests the fluid will become well known in their hometown as having murdered someone. So I guess that's one way to become famous. So it's a little jokey, it's a little cutesy in that. It's a little hard to believe, like the demon behind this is also sort of culturally aware, and that it knows that violet is associated with nobility. It kind of flirts with a J designation. There's a line in here that says, "Bring your daughter to cult day." So it did try to be serious when it does that, by the way. So one commenter in the discussion section says it really well. And this line right here, the effects and phrases of the colors felt a little too robot chicken for my tastes. And that was Gafsey, the author of the previous article that we saw. So that's an excellent comment. Good job. Overall, I think that this is, a decent article. I think surely it can be up on the wiki. I don't see why not. It's not really that egregious of an article. It's just not very well put together as well. I think this is a little, I wish this wasn't here. It comes off as just a little too forward of a ploy to get people upvoting just due to a totally unrelated emotional quib, emotional hook. So, but besides that, just sort of a mild, sort of a mediocre read. All right, the next one is going to be SCP-6705. I'm going to need a bigger glass of water next time. This one, oh man, I don't know if I remember this one very well. Let's see. Oh God, I remember this one now. Okay, so this is basically, if you want to go ahead and cheat just a little bit, this is a Mu Sphere Incorporated entry in the series. If you know anything about this, this is a pun from New Sphere, and somebody, really grasped that low-hanging fruit so hard that they probably crushed it through, and came up with Mu Sphere Inc. So basically, it's thought-based milk products. And this is really one author's pet project, so we already know who this is. We already know who who wrote this. I'm having a little trouble with my throat here, so I'm going to get Amy to tell us about this while I get a little refill of water. So Amy, go ahead, please. And
an anomalous psychedelic that is injected occipitally.
Occipitally means back of the head. Amy's just crazy like that. Go ahead.
An anomalous description details in technical terms, but not too technical, the drug's pharmacodynamics and its academic backstory. It has something to do with biological infertility too. Things get weirder as the drug's manufacturer is Moosphere Incorporated, a thought-based milk product manufacturer. This somehow progresses to a geopolitical crisis involving Iran. The article gets a bit too boggy with self-supplied headcanon by the end of the description, stuff that could and maybe should be a footnote, and shorter. A great line in here gives an expert clinical account of having your mind blown. It says the brain of each affected subject displays unexpectedly elevated levels of neural activity, with patterns and formation akin to the appearance of interstellar nebulae. This article makes good use of video media, which is of good resolution with cinematic scenery, is well scripted and even better acted, particularly in the first video, with subtle and effective blend of camp style and glitch editing, and also has even the giant YouTube watermark somewhat justified. All surprising and unexpected victories here. Little moments make this tick, like the implication of amnestic drug abuse and the believably corporate activity of Moosphere Incorporated. I appreciate the simplification and brevity of the third addendum, which could have been prolonged into actual test logs.
Yeah, so that pretty much says it pretty well. So this was a interesting mix of multimedia. I think the Moosphere commercial kind of maybe will rub some people the wrong way, but I think it's just really, really well done. I think they do an excellent job on this. So we like to notice when articles have milk in them, and then this one is all about milk. So once again, it's sort of playing on that sort of motif of a joke that pops up all the dang time on the SCP Wiki. So that's that. It's not too long. I do want to point one thing out that really is just crazy to me, and it's this like mono word upvote thing. Here's one nice +1. Here's one milk +1. Here's one by placeholder McD soaking up the sunshine. Here's another. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 out of 9 comments. 4 of them are essentially contentless comments, and they're sort of mononeuronal as well. These are what I would call NPC applause. So they're basically they're so context non-specific that they could be literally applied anywhere to anything. There's absolutely no evidence. Obviously, these are people, but there's absolutely no evidence that these people aren't actually bots. And so that's why they're NPC upvotes, is because they leave things that just are barely relevant. And when you have something like a comment like this, moo, this is sort of, if you could take the experience of reading this article and put it into like, a visual form and show it to my kid who's 2 years old, my 2-year-old kid would say moo. So this person is operating on a 2-year-old level when it comes to comments, responding to articles. And the reason why I'm harping on this a little bit on a soapbox is because it does no good to anybody at all, least of all the author, to leave something like this. If you're gonna upvote it because you like it because it has a milk in it, or if you're gonna upvote it because you like it because it has a line from a song that you like, or because it reminds you of the sound that a cow makes, that's fine. That's fine. I least of all want to police comments or anything like that. But I just would urge people to put something of some substance in their comments, certainly their critique. That's really what helps people write. It's what helps the author let them know what they've done well. So yeah, the one word applause here, the NPC praise, the mononeuronal comment reactions, this shit has got to go. It's just absolutely disgusting, and that's how you kill a site, or at least how you know it's dying, because this is supposed to be a writing site. All right, so that's 6705. Let's move on to 6305. Take a look at what's going on here. Yeah, this one is basically middle school ghosts that are sort of commandered basically by a spider entity who was once a boy who attended this middle school. The conprocs start off way too dramatic with this sentence: Washington Middle School has been condemned. The sentence reads like the opening scroll of a Star Wars movie, but they do get really, really interesting a little later on. Let me try something. I guess I can't do that. Okay. So the conprocs really pick up and get a little interesting after that, so that's nice. The exploration log is really, really freaking creepy. And I would like to commend it for this format that it does, where, as you can see on the screen perhaps, it's mostly exposition and then very rarely peppers it almost like a spice with actual dialogue and lines. That's usually the opposite from what you see. Usually you see a lot of lines and just peppered exposition and description going on. But I commend this style. I think it reads much more naturally, really kind of bypasses all the Marvel Universe characters sort of banter that usually throat clears the way for the actual developments in these things. So I really like that. And speaking of MCU, it is marvelously creepy as well. It starts to weaken the article, I think, a little later on. There's a series of interviews. Basically, it's just a little strange to have this facial identification scan status be positive, because it's kind of out of the blue. It's not really something that's usual in these things, and so you just know that it's going to be a point that the author uses to sort of like turn this thing and come into play. It's kind of like seeing like a scarecrow in the field in a scary movie at dusk. It's like, okay, so I know that scarecrow is going to like move around, because that's why it's there in the first place. That's kind of what this facial identification scan status bar thing is like. It kind of sticks out like a sore thumb, and really just a plot gimmick, I think. Clearly there just to go wrong. The horror logic in this piece is something from, unfortunately, something like from a Hollywood movie. I think a lot of us got into SCP for horror initially, at least, and still to this day, some of the articles, because we were so disappointed with the mainstream formulaic productions of horror, things like, whatever is coming out of Hollywood these days. Who gives a shit? And so this honestly regresses the genre back into what really would feel right at home in a Hollywood tier movie studio. So you can take that as a compliment if you want to. I certainly don't think that it is. We have the villain doing scary stuff in the interviews just to do it, just to scare someone else. The interview is really kind of fucked up levels of disturbing at times in a great way. There's a sentence here. The character's name is Nassar, so the sentence, Nassar's screams are barely audible. Nassar's screams are barely audible as Hedge's voice overpowers the microphones. That's obviously terrifying to think about. Things that will unfortunately follow me to the bed tonight. That's no bueno. There are as many moments here that sort of cartoonize the horror. So as many good points of horror, there's just as many points that sort of collapse it, deflate it into something a little disappointing. The word Jesus is actually here. There it is. Jesus is actually typed out. There's some really odd inclusions here, like this one right here. The ghosts are sitting at a table near Fisher, but whether they are studying or reading for leisure is unclear. I don't really know what relevance that has to anything. Not sure why that phrase is in there. Really strange. So basically, the kid is having a hard time because he's being bullied. Instead of bringing something like an AK-47 to the school, he turns into a spider and eats his classmates. The characterization, I think, someone says this, I think, in the comments, the characterization is really, really bad. There are some very, very poor passages, poor kid, It's basically that trope that we've all seen before where the kid just needs a hug and has been bullied, and so somebody finally comes along and tells him that it's all okay, and stuff like that. It just needs someone to understand. So, for example, these lines right here. The D class, poor kid, must have hated having a million eyes on him. What makes you say that? Well, I mean, just look at his body language, hiding behind his books, walking with his hood up. He probably felt alone. I'm willing to bet. And then the poor characterization comes back. This person says, are you an expert on human psychology? No. So you're telling me that the criteria for determining or wondering if someone is an expert on human psychology is looking at body language as overt as hiding behind books and walking with a hood up? So this is just really, really poor characterization, really effortless, very weak, very lazy, frail characterization. It's certainly the worst part of the article. It's a cheap, sort of cheaply constructed It's ungraceful. For example, while exploring the middle school, the D class just so happens to come across a diary that is of the kid. It's of the kid's writing. This happens among a bunch of dead bodies too, which is a little strange. And so, of course, it is the troubled kid turned anomalies journal, and this gets, as we see, its own addendum. Literally, we have the line, and uh-oh, there is a journal here. Let's see if we can find that. Uh-oh. Uh-oh? Uh-oh. No, I guess not. There is a journal here. I guess not. It's gone. Who knows? Maybe the author removed it. It'd be a good thing to do. Anyways, it also turns out that the journal is a pre-transformation into a spider journal as opposed to like a post one. No, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. It turns out that it isn't a pre-transformation into spider journal from the kid, but a post one because it's made of human skin and spider's silk. But as you read it, it actually is pre. So that's why I got confused. It's just a very strange thing. It's attempting to be unsettling, but it comes off as kind of corny and forced. The journal addendum does a fairly poor job of justifying itself. It does so in a very, very typical fashion, probably the lowest hanging fruit that you can get to, not even getting on your tippy toes to reach it. And when it comes to justifying diaries and containment fiction articles, this one says, my therapist says I should keep a diary of what I'm thinking during the day. So that's your low-hanging fruit for that. Doesn't come off as very creative or innovative in the thought department. The writing also in the journal is a little too advanced for someone who we're told earlier is a 9-year-old. Phrases and sentences like this. It's just really hypocritical, writes the 9-year-old in their journal. So that's a little unbelievable. It seems like basically another instance of a botched characterization. To add to this, the writing is in the exact same voice as the D class as above. So basically what this tells us is that it's the author not paying attention to detailed attention really to the characters, basically the author's natural voice coming through too strongly in both characters. So the tone and composition are both clunky in pages. We get passages such as this one: several nooses comprised of rope descend from the ceiling. That really goes without saying. And then also throughout the explanation, throughout the interviews, we get one too many instances of the facial identification software identifying this as the little boy, Aaron Fisher, who's turned into an anomalous spider. A little too frequently for our intelligence not to be insulted, or at least bothered, just because it goes without saying, once again, that the facial scans, we don't need the facial scans to tell us that this is the anomaly. The article should tell us that by its context, and honestly would if the author decided to leave out the facial scans. The clinical tone here, I think, is excellent. It has a gorgeous, clean CSS theme that could even make ACS, I think, look pretty good on a good day, on its best day. But I don't think it can escape this sort of post-Columbine and by now completely depleted emotional allegory of, hey, someone should have just done something, I should have done something, I'm sorry. And that's literally a line in here. Someone should have done something, I should have done something, I'm so sorry. The characterization starts off bad, like I said, and completely plummets into caricature. During these lines, why does everyone hate me? The Nassar sits down beside the entity's head. Nassar says, I don't hate you, neither did they. You had a lot of strong emotions, a lot of feelings. Everyone has those, and nobody hates you. Fisher says, I just wanted them to feel what I felt. I didn't know what it was like to feel empty on the inside. They had no idea what I was going through, but they do now. And then Fisher also says, it's not my fault, it's not my fault, it's not my fault. And then Nassar shouts at him at the climax of the Hollywood movie, I know. And then that stops Fisher in his tracks, because remember, all he needs is just a little bit of emotional hugging to stop the entirety of the anomaly. And then Nassar ends and says, I know it wasn't your fault, Aaron. You just did what was best at the time. You're allowed to feel that way, to act out if you want, but there are other methods that we can use to help you feel better. So this really does sort of devolve into caricature by the end of it. I think this is probably too highly rated for the quality. I wonder if this is writing off of article recognition. This person just had somewhat of a hit with SCP-6800 being covered by one of those YouTubers, although that had some mixed reactions as well. So, well below the rating 24, even this early into the game for this article. It looks good. The clinical tone is great, but everything else it tries to do, it does really, really poorly. And unfortunately, I think it puts most of its center of gravity on those weak points, and so the article doesn't really stand up for me at all. Next one is SCP-6209. Let's see what this one is. Okay, we got another content warning, so let's look at that. Gaslighting, toxic friendships, abusive friendships, mentions of mental health, and manipulation. I have to wonder to myself if the SCP reading community has really gotten this baby powder soft, but I guess they have. Really serious PTSD kind of stuff going on there. So from the picture, this kind of reminds you of a dating sim, but this is an anomaly of a chat game that impermanently alters the ideologies of the participants. So in other words, it encourages people to have similar beliefs as it does, and this lasts for a very short time. The person goes back to normal. So not really the most exciting anomaly, and once again, you would be excused for thinking that this is an anomaly about a dating sim, but it isn't. This is where a strange confusion starts to show up in the SCP Wiki at about this time in the week. This author kicks it off, and it's basically the confusion between the terms sentient and sapient. This is something that the SCP Wiki doesn't seem to be able to get right. So for example, confused, this author in one sentence mentions that a character is sentient and also is able to respond to the user typing outside of their programming and verbalize, volitional lines, which doesn't make any sense. If you can reason and speak, then you should be sapient as opposed to sentient. Of course, sapient being sort of a higher version of sentient that really is basically mutually exclusive. Excuse me, I shouldn't burp in the microphone. But unfortunately, this mistake happens numerous times. It's got average to below clinical tone with certain phrases like this one. Let's take a look at this. Actually, this is a really, really bad one. So the clinical tone really, really suffers, unfortunately. Here it is. It's in the question logs. D number was questioned their opinion on this every day for a week. So that doesn't make grammatical sense there. And then we have another one that shows researcher Bellflowers, who is slightly mimetic resistant, was chosen to staff. I guess that kind of works, but it's just a little clunky and awkward. So basically, as you look at it, maybe you've already noticed you've got a lot of just hot pink, baby blue sort of coloration going on here in a lot of the divs. And if you would be wondering by this point if this is an article for preteens by preteens, then you would be correct. The chat, as we see, is filled with, especially when we get down here to the lower ones, just it's very florid character work, and it's actually filled, here's one instance of it here, filled with Japanese emoticons. And any substance to this seems to be wholly preoccupied with the sort of social dilemmas that keep, preteens up at night. Such as, your friends are going out and want to go to a place you don't want to go. What do you say? These are answers from this anomalous intelligence that are sort of life ignorant, and in my opinion seem to unintentionally echo the worst decisions and motives of things like the SCP staff over the last few years. For example, there's one line that says, in a social dilemma, you should seriously just give in. Would you rather be a good person or lose your friends? Clearly with the decision weighing to the keep your friends side and be a bad person decision. So it feels like a gratuitous excuse to include bubblegum pop hyperplastic chat divs. There's a little bit of a deeper allegory here about how unsatisfying it would be to automatically be able to change your friends' opinions so that they all agree with you. An allegory that, of course, is lost to the irony of this article being present upon the SCP Wiki. But yeah, this was just an easy and indelible negative rate, in my opinion, about halfway through, easily. To match the just adolescent churlishness of this article, the author comments in the comments, the author post, I mean, is really they post what are the full-fledged lyrics to really a punk emo band that isn't even good punk emo, in my opinion. It's sort of ultra formulaic, tailored for adolescent mind, sort of punk emo. So this is really below the average intelligence and well below the emotional par of the Foundation. And it's sad that it isn't below the intellectual and emotional par for the SCP Wiki. As you see, it is, I think, accepted, decently positively rated at +10. So no one really had the balls to downvote this. It's like people just, they either plus it or they just don't vote at all. Looks like there's maybe one downvote in there somewhere. Everyone else who doesn't like this, they seem to sort of Homer Simpson their way into the hedges, as opposed to be like, hey, this is a piece of shit article. So, and then the author post is also likewise just gratuitously preteen. I would really question whether or not this person meets the age limit requirements of the wiki, but you know, hey. It says, this one, yeah, this one is personal. How personal? You don't need to know. Okay. Just know that this one comes from the heart. A hurt heart at that. Oof. Just know there's a reason why I like Swan Song, because in a way, that's what this is regarding some certain aspects of my life. There's also a ton of other songs that fit this as well, but it's a lot, so I won't link them all. So thank God this person didn't YouTube link all of the lyrics to more of the teeny bop emo punk bands that she happens to like in this moment. So Diana Berry is the author. I think it's a terrible, terrible job. I really hope that this article is not her only work. I hope there's a bit better ones to counterbalance her reputation that she now has with me. This is just an absolutely abysmal article. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. Moving on, 6682. All right. This, as you might notice, has the numbers. Famous numbers, 682 in it. This is a humanoid anomaly. It has the ability to modify its documentation to convey itself in its own document, which it usually does in a more favorable light, or it just messes with the researchers and the personnel. It's clear from the first line, yet unveiled dramatically in a collapsible later in the article, that the anomaly can do this. But for some reason, like I said, at the end of the article, this very obvious fact from the get-go was presented as if it was a secret, which really is quite anticlimactic when it comes to the construction, architecture, and pacing of this article. There are a ton of hidden collapsibles in this, not to spoil this too much for you. There is another one that the hide function says she knows, which that's just inexcusably cringed, in my opinion. So basically, an interpersonnel scandal is uncovered in this anomaly with regards to ongoing containment breaches and why they might be continuously happening. The hidden collapsibles help establish the character here, I would say. That's the most gracious and charitable thing I could say about the hidden collapsibles. I don't think they're necessary at all. The image is barely visible. I do have to wonder if that's CC. Kudos on you if that is a CC image. They're going to take it down if not. Pretty cool if it is. The inferior grammar exists by the third sentence in the description. Is it the description or is it the containment procedures? It's the description. There's some clever tonal play between the document and the anomaly's vandalization of it. That is to say, there's some clever play between the black and the red text. And for example, such as these lines. in black. As such, and then red, SCP-6682 should be allowed 2 hours of escorted roaming of Site-82, as it poses massive risk in the case of a containment breach. SCP-6682 has been observed to be conventionally attractive, so that's pretty funny. This does get a little ominous, this play between the red and the black text at times, so it's not just for fun. It's also, if we undo all of these collapsibles, we can find it. Cause of death, disobedience, so that's pretty fucked up. But there are as many odd moments in this as there are effective ones. For example, the tech maintenance, if we can scroll to that. Maintenance note attributes a spontaneous fire to the version of Windows operating system being run on a computer that is controlling the CCTV. That's a little strange to me. There are pedestrian uses of redacted all over this article. Data expunged. You see one there. And then further down, there's a censored. There's another redacted. These are really very unfortunate uses of that. There's some bad dialogue at times. Let's point this one out. This is an agent saying this. I signed up because I'm saving the damn world from these creepies. That's a no-no. Don't do that line. That's really, really bad. Don't call them creepies for just a thinnest, superficial attempt of characterization. That's no good. This article also calls a fully human anomaly sentient instead of sapient. And there it is right there. Nobody told me these things were sentient. Never mentions sapience, which of course a person, even anomalous, would be. The action and characters sort of converge at I have a name, I'm not a number sort of grab that is constantly and very routinely played on containment fiction articles. And there's an end stage allusion to SCP-682. We have a line basically echoing a very famous one from 682, and it's this one right here. Isn't it disgusting? Implying this might be sort of out of universe, at least, a humanoid interpretation of 682. And I have to wonder, because this is not the only article that has done this in Series 7, I wonder if we're going to have to read 100 of these sorts of 682 homages per series from now on, one for every new designation that ends in 682. By the way, we do have another content warning. I'm so sorry that we didn't do that first. We have psychological manipulation, emotional manipulation, and suicide. So once again, these are sort of baby powder level content warnings. It's just remarkable to see that the SCP Wiki might have gotten this soft somehow. So that's 6682. I do recommend it as a read. It's not too terribly long. I think it's worth your while. It's not perfect. Nothing is. And I think 21 is really a fair rating, as long as it doesn't go up too much from that moment in the future weeks. We're almost done here. 6388 is the next one. This is, God, a really busy week. Holy shit. All right, so this one is pretty interesting. It's, as you can see, an extraterrestrial. It really plays it really straight. I was really kind of confused and concerned about this the whole time. For example, it says it's a sapient humanoid entity with bright green coloration skin, long thin limbs, a spherical head, and 2 big black eyes without any pupils. And so it plays it just like alarmingly straight, almost to where you think that someone has broken the rule of you're not supposed to play pop culture references just like verbatim. But that's exactly what's happening here. I will say that if you have the patience to get through this, which isn't easy, because not only is it a little trite just to bite through, but there's some really, really poor sentences in here. Terrible clinical tone. Right here, for example, 2 big black eyes. That's not good. So you might be irate at how straight this trope is played, but the patience is rewarded by the end with a good old twist. But there are really too many omissions of sufficient detail for this to really, I think, work for me. Multiple tents have been placed around SCP-688A for studying it without the use of moving it. Doesn't work at all. And then the voice is something heard from the camera. Okay. That's also kind of a no-no. Other agents searching around the area discover that a bunch of trees have been destroyed or pushed away by a big moving mass. Okay. The camera placed on the anomalous tank sent out by Site-41 shows the tank being persecuted by the entity. So this, needs a metric ton of polish. It's terrible. It still has XXXs in it. I know this is like a no-no, but this should really be a J, honestly. It's not good enough to be a main list. I think it actually works better as a J because it is kind of funny at the end. I think that if it were a J, it would probably honestly do a whole lot better than 11. But even at 11, with all the errors that are in this, it's just, once again, another one of those articles, and maybe we're seeing these a little too soon without giving them time to play out. But it's just astounding to see some of these make it on the SCP Wiki, just with how many problems they have. All right, SCP-6394. This one is about bees. So we've seen milk quite a lot. We've seen fish quite a lot. And so, of course, the bee motif, the low-hanging beef thing, the low-hanging bee thing was not going to be outdone by the milk or by the fish. So we have bees, and honestly, by this point in this time, I'll take anything besides fish. So let's go. So these bees are anomalous. They have the informational intelligence of a level 4 Foundation researcher, and so they confound their containment attempts as well as their own documentation. So very similar to the previous 682 that we just saw, we have the anomaly interacting and speaking through really its own documentation. This doesn't really come into play except for some truly awful attempts at humor, which we'll get to in just a second. And even then, it only appears a few times. They like to make multimedia content, these anomalous bees. So this is really very close to Neo-Lull Foundation. It's very close to an instant downvote. For example, the RASA article at the beginning reads, documents pertaining to this have to be kept on paper for all personnel because either one of you is secretly a bee or the honeybees have access to the credentials. So it's just a little goofy. And then you have the goofy and zaniness turned up to 11 in these footnotes where also SCP 6394. If you're reading this, thanks for ruining it for all of us, you black and yellow jackasses. Okay, so that literally appears in a SCP document in the database. And then another footnote says the feeling is mutual. So we've got some real problems here, tonally, I think. It's amazing that this is not considered as egregious as just, total spelling errors, in my opinion. They're basically the same thing. The paper thing doesn't really come back again, so it's odd that it's there, in my opinion. It doesn't really come back to play at all. So the rest of the documentation features similar troll-like footnotes, such as, I'm right here, come and get me. We can't see the footnotes because they have a cool little CSS thing, but that's one of them. And then other sort of recursively, witty or attempted to be witty comments on how funny they think that they are, these bees. And then other non-footnote lines of hilarity from the bees include things like this. With all respect, Doctor, we're a bee-themed cover band running from a cross between God and the DMV. We aren't telling you jack shit. And then, of course, they have a little passage in here about they're going to release the Yellow Album. What are you going to release after that? We're going to release the Black Album. And then we're going to release the Yellow Album again. So that's either hilarious or a little toe-curlingly cringy, depending upon who you are. So the closing statement to an initial interview mentions that anyone with bee-related allergies shouldn't be working with this anomaly or the media that they produce. Later in the article, this is noted again, almost verbatim, without the author really showing a hint of awareness of this. So when presented with such, I guess we'd call it stupidity, what can one say but Neo-Lull Foundation? So it might at a first glance look as though this article has incorrect formatting. The section heads, for example, the special containment procedures in the description, they're really hard to catch it looks as though they're almost not bolded at all. But that's actually the fault of the custom CSS. These things are bolded, you just have to squint, which is a very odd risk-reward decision since CSS themes are supposed to be all about looks. But maybe because the SCP Wiki clearly doesn't know how to use the distinction between sapient and sentient, this article actually uses both to describe the anomaly, which is totally unnecessary. Bees are a thing on the SCP Wiki, of course, as we said, to good effect and to not so good effect. It tends to be amazing or terrible, and the terrible versions are typically infested with really bad puns. So the naming of the containment supervisor here is Jacob Beery, or I'm sure you pronounce that slightly differently. The self-portrait of one of the anomalous bees who likes to produce multimedia content is titled The Notorious B.I.G. Later on in the article, we see a vinyl record titled Queen Bee, Bohemian Rhapsody. Just let that one sink in for just a second. And then, of course, we have another pun, Freddie Mercury. Okay, another impossible to fathom content that rolls the eyes quite reliably. So I think we can firmly put this one in the not as opposed to the hot classification of the running B gag. If we want to look at the author post, it's really unremarkable except for this line right here. Here's some song lyrics with a fancy background so that I don't get crucified. And it's just really sad to read into that what the SCP Wiki's norms have really become. That's become something a little too common, I think. So that's SCP-6394. I don't think you should read it. I think it'll hurt your eyes, much like a bee would if it flew in there and stung you. All right, 6839, and we are 2 away from ending this at about 2 hours and 30 minutes, which is entirely too long of a cast, and I appreciate you sticking in with me, but we'll find a way to make this a little shorter next time. Let's go ahead and finish it up. This one, 6839, this is a decrepit log cabin that spontaneously manifests in a forest. It is alternatively described here as a Type Omega-4 Heisenbergian metaphorical narrative extruder, which is quite a mouthful, but that tells you that this has something flirting with pataphysics or something like that. So the red center-aligned wannabe song lyric text up top is in start case, and start case is where you capitalize every word of the phrase, regardless of what it is. So that's in start case. That's close to an instant downvote, in my opinion. It's literally as if the horrifying trend observed in that previous author post we just looked at from the previous article has finally spilled out of its containment and is now in the actual article. And why not? No one seems to be holding anyone's feet to the fire when it comes to quality or standards on the SCP Wiki anymore. This visually stylized and immersion-breaking documentation continues with an abrupt, out-of-place breaks in the tone, just like right here, where the entity is located within the bedroom, what's left of the cold heart in your bed. Yeah. The article takes a stark but not unexpected pataphysical turn, even goes so far as to abstract the characters that are introduced into just mundane and generic character A, character B, character C, and so on. So reading down in these actual bits, the author knows very well how to insert effective body horror with some really, really disquieting imagery. The characters seem to be stalked by the pataphysical demand for narrativic progression itself. For example, one gives up the effort of going on. Here we see him say, "I can't anymore. I just can't. We have to keep going, or it'll kill us. Just leave me and go." Character A is suddenly dragged, screaming, and the video cuts out. So I get very strong Blair Witch vibes from this found footage running through the woods, finally finding themselves in a cabin sort of thing. I think it's pretty spooky, honestly. I like how the installments here are sort of staccato, just sort of very brief, very pointed. They give a very sharp and stinging sense of horror, reminiscent really of those jarring transitionary scenes in the same genre classic, The Ring. that you might remember. Very similar to that. In one transcript, character E suddenly phases back in to being Dennis, and along with one other person, Todd. And so I'm not sure if this is intentional, but it does coincide with this character E suddenly coming out of the woods and entering a clearing. I'm not too sure, but it seems again like a concealed use of a pataphysical metaphor. And I think that's pretty cool, honestly. The author expertly drops bombshells of data for the reader out of nowhere, with no warning, such as this one. Dennis sees Todd's antlers protruding from his sockets and pulls out the rusted blade he used to sacrifice the deer. By this point in the article, that's all just completely new information. So this is just an amazing, clever, very effective, very skillful job by the author here. The rest of the article has this fever dream-like logic that offers really no shapely resolution, which I think is both ballsy and the correct compositional decision, particularly for this piece. So let's take a look real quick and see who the author is. Bread Tyrant, kind of a hit or miss author. One of their other articles in this week didn't do well in my opinion, but this one is absolutely fantastic. Definitely would encourage you to read that one. All right, and then the last two, we're almost done. This is 6782. I need a little bit of a break, so Amy, why don't you do what I pay you for, please? Tell us a little bit about what this is about, please.
A Foundation researcher's reflection that is disjointed and clumsy, possibly as a result of the researcher's crippling perfectionism. The author has a fun time with the concept of a reflection, giving an almost early cartoon logic to it with respect to other, non-anomalous reflections. However, the clinical tone is too inexact and/or convoluted, which makes what is going on with the reflection a bit hard to comprehend. It skimps on the twist that the reflection survived and for some reason grants the researcher the ability to treat mirrors like portals into a reflective reality. There is an attempted message here, but it just doesn't come through. The comments reveal this is a rewrite of an existing article, so the disjointedness may be double voice syndrome here. Kind of fitting when you think about it in a meta sort of way.
Yeah. So this is pretty short. I think it's just really... I think it's really uneventful. I think it's sort of a sleepy article. It doesn't really do anything. It doesn't really go anywhere. I think the writing is fine. There weren't really a lot of spag errors in this. And like Amy said, this is a rewrite of a pre-existing article. So those are always sort of touch and go. They're almost sort of like best fits. And there's really only a limited palette that you can go in the directions of when you're given something like this to start with. Essentially a completed product. So kudos to the author for trying. This is a rewrite of Cremo's original article, and I don't know who the author is. Penton. So decent job. I think it's certainly stands out as a unique read among this week. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. I think the rating is fair for the experience, but it is short, so that's an added plus, and maybe you don't have a reason to not do it. All right, our very last article of the week this week is SCP-6295. This is a fiction-born serpent with connections to the serpent's hand. Fittingly enough, it acts as an anomalous recruiting tool for the GOI. This is a very straightforward article, and it features an example of instance fiction that the anomaly then affects. And you can see that down here. And the part where the anomaly shows up is italicized. So this is a nice, very short, punchy article that is very focused in what it wants to say and do. I think actually that works against it here. It's really barely anything at all. It barely becomes anything. The serpent is trying to help really progress the goals and desires of the serpent's hand. It really does so by apparently recruiting people, but if you read the actual italicized text here, it doesn't really even do a great job at that. The characters, which are borrowed from someone else's book, sort of are turned into NPCs in order to enact that anomalous effect of recruitment. So I don't know how well of a job it does. Certainly from a writer's standpoint, I don't think it does really a lot. seems to be a little bit out of its element in some ways. It also may or may not rely totally on the reader as being a fanboy of the Serpent Hand GOI. I'm not a huge fan, so maybe somebody who is thinks this is great. I just don't know. There's not much else to say about this one. The article is passable, I think, with a safe rating, as you see now, 16 in a day. It's probably pretty safe. But I think ultimately it's another question mark on the standards of the SCP Wiki. And I'll say this too, the problem with injecting a lot of like fictitious narrative based anomalies do this, where they take pre-existing works and sort of modify them slightly for the reader. So when you're injecting someone else's text and prose into your article to demonstrate the narrative anomaly, in this case it's the rover boys shipwrecked by author Winfield from 1924, unless you're a really, really, really good writer, that other author's text is probably going to be the best text in the article, and it's probably going to upstage your own. So this is a common pitfall for the confic author that you got to watch out for. If you're going to tackle this, you got to do it exactly right. It's like shooting a bear. If you don't do it right, you're going to wish that you didn't. It's not going to end well for you. So I think that's kind of what's happening here. The italicized parts are meant to indicate the affected portions of the anomaly in this passage, but unfortunately I think they could also indicate the sudden loss of compositional quality, and that's just as much of a compliment to Arthur Winfield as it is sort of a rag on the author who wrote this, who is, surprisingly, Observer September, a longtime SCP author who is well known to us, and despite this article, well respected. So it could be your thing. I think you should give it a look because it's short and you should make your own determination for that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone outside and in between those two, are all of the SCP articles this week that made it successfully onto the SCP Wiki. And that was absolutely exhausting. I think it was easier to do than trying to read these articles nightly as they come out, which, as I said before, certainly is the sort of hell for some poor soul, and might be mine when I die. Can you imagine reading them as they come out aloud? I think there's a confic article in that. Maybe I'll write that. But anyways, so this has been our inaugural, I suppose you could say, our first cast for this wrap-up, this weekly wrap-up. I want to thank everybody for joining. I saw a few people join in and go away, and I appreciate y'all showing up at the first place. And it seems as though there's one lonely viewer here, so I appreciate that, though. And if you have anything to say, feel free to throw it up next time as we go through next week's SCP articles as they are successful on the wiki. This is our SCP Meta channel on Twitch. We also have a YouTube channel that all this content will live permanently at, as Twitch deletes these videos after just a little while, a few weeks, I think. So check the links in the channel for that, all of you who are watching this ex post facto. And then, of course, join us nightly at 7:30. We do a lot less formal, a lot less strenuous things. We kind of take it easy, kick back at 7:30 p.m. Central Time and consume confic material. Podcasts are a big part of that, multimedia, and we just kind of watch it together and react. Those videos are also on the YouTube channel if you missed those and want to see a few, just again, I get a flavor for what that is about. And of course, our big show is on Saturday. That is at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. That is Confic Call-In. It's also called SCP Meta. You can show up. You can get into our Discord, the Society for Containment Fiction Discord, to interact. You can get on the Twitch stream to interact, or you can call our phone number that will be on the show and will be live, and that's on the screen right now just in case, 316-444-3115. So join us for all our goodies. We have it going all week long. Thank you so much for watching this. It is just terribly long, and I'm going to do my best to try to get that down, shave off maybe an hour for next week. Of course, we are at the mercy of the SCP Wiki, and I think this would have been a much more manageable stream and production if we didn't have basically the last 2 days of content dumps, most of which wasn't very good, but we had some seriously good articles this week. I think it's a contention between Dave You Fool's article and SD Locke's article for best of the week, so I'll decide that as a tough decision to make. Both are excellent. So anyway, thank you so much for watching this. I hope it has helped and provided a service in some way. If you aren't able to read all of these in a given day or week, at least you can check these out and see what they're about and see what somebody thinks of them, and start to form your own opinions on them. So thank you very much for joining, and we'll catch you next time. Join us tomorrow, or if not, on Monday night. This is Lack of Lepers, also known as SCP-CRNP. Take it easy.